Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In this video, I wanted to talk about how to establish and configure a point-to-site connection in Azure. Now, the point-to-site connection is the P2S connection. Probably you are already aware of this type of connection, even if you don't know that you are using this. For example, if you are working for anyone and you have a laptop that you bring home, before you log in, say you're working from home these days, you log in, you actually connect to the corporate network over a VPN client. So you're clicking on something and that will establish some connection, and voila, you can now access your corporate network resources. So what typically you do, you are a client, so your every single client, they will have the VPN client is configured. When you click on it, it will make connection to your corporate network and help you establish the connection. And what it really does, it just you're although you are at home, to the network, it will seem like you are just an extension of the network. Okay. So if you look at a general architecture, we're gonna do the same thing. Instead of the corporate network to be on-prem, now we're just gonna use Azure to set up our environment. That's just simple. If you think that way, it's really a very simple thing to do. So in our lab, what we'll do, we'll go to our Azure environment. We'll create a VNet. We'll call that VNet server. And when you create a VNet in Azure, it creates a default subnet. Now in that subnet, we need to create a gateway subnet because we need to deploy a virtual private gateway. And that gateway is actually gonna help us to connect this machine back to Azure. Okay, so to deploy a virtual private gateway, we need a gateway subnet. So we'll know how to do that. And we'll use one of the private IP spaces in Azure. So once all of that done, what we need to do, we need to come back to your, after the deployment of the virtual private gateway is done, we have to configure that. Now during the configuration step, you will need the root certificates. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll go back to the client machine and run some standard PowerShell command to generate a self-signed client certificate and root certificate. We'll take the root certificate, export it, and add it to the configuration wizard so that when we download the VPN client from Azure, install it in my home machine, okay, then I can click on connect and it will help me connect to the Azure network. And this would look like it's just an extension of our entire network. So I will be able to connect our Azure resources using the private IP address. I don't have to use the public IP address to connect to these machines. Okay. And to prove that, what we'll do, we'll deploy one server in here, we'll install the Iis Rule. And before any connection is made, I'll show you that you cannot use the private IP, but you can use the public IP to get to the website. And once we are done with the that and a VPN connection is made, then you will see that from the host machine, we'll be able to connect to the private IP address and still be able to go to the browser, web browser, where a site is hosting. Now, let's get started with the lab. It's a lot that I talk, but really the lab should be very simple. Now, in this example, I'm just going to use my Windows 10 machine that I'm using right now. If you want to do a little bit more complicated, you can create this home machine architecture as well in Azure. Just create another virtual network and deploy a Windows 10 client, something like that. Okay. So once again, real quick, the lab setup, we're going to create a gateway subnet, say VNet server. We're going to create a virtual private gateway uh, inside that. So we need a gateway subnet in that. Then we're going to configure our point to site connection. We're going to generate our root and client certificate. Then our export the root certificate, configure the gateway, and then we're going to download the client in our host machine, which is Windows 10, and then we'll test the connection. So let's just get started with our lab. So this is my Azure environment. Okay, the another thing I actually wanted to show you before I do that, I think I'm going to follow, there is one link over here that I'm going to give you in our lecture. Let me just put it in here as well in my notes so I can give it to you. So this is a documentation from Azure itself or Microsoft, where they have already given us some guideline. So if you look at it here, configure a point-to-site VPN connection using Azure Certificate Authentication. Here, this is the Azure. Okay, they have a private IP address range, and here is the route-based VPN gateway, and these are the clients. And when the connection is made, although the connection is going over the internet, it uses encryption, and you have a P2S SSTP tunnel created for the traffic. Okay, so here they have used sample VNet and the virtual network gateway, how you can configure. So we will try to use these values as closely as possible. So where we want to start is going to create a virtual network, and let's deploy the virtual network in the East US and be as closely try to follow this lab as possible. And the resource group, they are calling it test RG. Okay, so let's just come back over here and let's see what we can do. So virtual network, so let's start there. I already have a whole bunch of virtual network that I'm not going to use for this lab. I'm just going to create a brand new one. So create, that is giving me this, so let's call it my virtual or VPN gateway. Okay, uh, VNet, something like that, and I'm gonna say okay. So I'm deviating the name just a little bit so I know what that resource group is meant for. Now here the name of the VNet, they say just use VNet1. What I'll do, I'm gonna call it V instance detail. Hold on, instance detail virtual network is VNet say server. Okay, because in here I'm going to host a web server. Region is, let's use stick to the East US. Where is my East? Just let me just type East US. So we picked up that. So we got this as same. We changed the name just a little, and the resource group just a little. So next, going to the IP address. So since I have used whole bunch of IP address for my case, is the 10.4.0.0 is the first available IP address space. So I'm going to deviate that just a little. And over here, what they have done, they have created a subnet, and they just called it a front end subnet and call it 10.100. For us, what we'll do, we'll just create and change the default subnet name to front end, and it's going to be 10.4.0.0.24. That's all we need. Okay, come back over here. So we have really done all of that stuff, and then we can create. So let's just go to the security. Everything in here I'm going to keep it as disabled. Make sure the firewall disabled, DDoS disabled, so all of them are disabled. Tags, I don't use it for lab environment, so go to the review and create. So this is a simple virtual network creation, so it should be done very quickly. So there we go. So now the deployment is done, and it says the deployment is complete. So I can go to the resource, and if you see, the VNet server is the virtual network that got created in East US location. Here is the private IP address space, and if I go to the subnet, I have a front-end subnet that's available. I can host up to 251 resources, okay, in this particular subnet. Now let's go back and see. So next job for us is to create the VPN gateway. Now to create the VPN gateway, so what you need to do, you need to go back to the virtual network gateway, and then uh, you have to create a gateway subnet first. I'm not sure why they didn't show you that you needed a gateway subnet. Maybe they have created, interesting, they have placed this under the VNet one. So we're just gonna do it just in a little bit way. So here, over here, what I would like to do, like to create a gateway subnet, and let's see if the gateway subnet, I just need to take a smaller chunk of this subnet as the gateway subnet. Let me think about it just a little. No, I think I'm looking at it wrong. So this is a chunk from a 16 space, IP space. So if you look at the gateway subnet, it's actually giving me a different range, 10410/24. But it's going to create another subnet that will have 251. But I really don't need that many IPs. So what you should be doing, if you look at over here, they are using a /27. So what I'll do from the default option, this is the only thing I'm going to change. So see, now it's giving me a much smaller range, because I know that I'm going to use a subnet to host only my VPN gateway, and that's about it. So once you have that, you can hit save, and rest of the things you can still keep it as is. So you can hit save. So what it does, it now created a gateway subnet for us. Now what we want to do is deploy a virtual machine in the front end. Okay, so what we will do, say go to the overview and go to my resource group, and in this resource group, let's just create a Windows Server 2019 data center. Just deploy this one. Okay, so call it a test server and make it in the East US. What is my East US? And just give some username password. Then since we're going to install the Iis, I'm going to open up a couple more ports in here. Go to disk, go to networking. This one, we're going to make sure that it's in the VNet server and also it's in the front end. You cannot anyway choose the gateway subnet as a special subnet, so we are good here. And then go to management, disable the boot diagnostics, and that's I do for the lab environment. Tag I don't assign for the lab environment, and then just create the virtual machine. Okay, so give it a second and see what happens. Actually, the validation is successful now, so let's just hit the create button and let's get started with the deployment of this particular virtual machine. Alright everyone, the virtual machine deployment is now done. So let's just go to the resource quickly, and the virtual machine got a public IP address and a private IP address. So from my client machine, uh, let's just do one thing. Just try to do remote desktop connection. So we'll try to get to this particular machine. Let me just copy this one and log into this particular server. Okay, and okay, so now we are logging inside this particular server that we just created. what we want to do in this particular server is to install the Iis Web Server. Okay, so if I use the public IP address currently from my host Windows 10 machine, if I try to go to that particular IP address, although we have opened the port 80 and port 443, there is nothing running. So it is not going to resolve to anything. Okay, but once we are inside this virtual machine, let's get the uh, your your server manager to load. Once server manager is available, we're going to install the Iis rule in it, and it's very simple standard installation. So let's wait another second for the server manager to come, and we're going to close and say don't show this and close. And what we do, we're going to add new roles and feature. It's still opening, so you get this warning. So let's see, let's click it again. Now we have this add roles and features wizard available, and if you look at it right now, you have the file and storage local server. Those, I mean, the file and storage is really the only role that is installed. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna click next, 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 and then we're gonna find the web server role. Okay, and it's gonna say, okay, add some other features that are required. I'll say, yeah, add features. Hit next, 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 and here I typically always choose this restart the destination server automatically if required, and then hit install, and that should install your web server role in this particular virtual machine. So kind of think what's happening. We are creating an architecture where we are hosting a web server, but the web server say it's part of the Azure network. Now, since I am a client and I'm not connected over VPN, if I want to get to this particular web server, I have to go over the internet. So I have to use the public IP address. I cannot use the private IP address. Now, going forward, what we'll do, we'll set up the VPN connection. So from my computer, which is Windows 10, I can still use the private IP address of this machine and be able to connect to the web server. Okay. So it just takes another minute or so to get this installation done. So let me pause another second and be back. Looks like this role installation is done. If you take the cursor over there, it says 100%. So I can close this one. And now at this time, if I try to go to 168.62.172.252, which is the public IP address, hit enter. I should be able to get to the Iis server and see that this is the page. That's a default Iis server web page. Now the question I want to ask, so can I use the private IP address from my machine? Okay, if I try to go there, and the answer is no, because this my Windows 10 that I'm using right now, it's not part of the 10.404. It has no idea what that private IP address is. Private IP addresses are not routable. All right, so once we have the VPN connection, you would see that even if I try to use the private IP address, I will be able to get to this web page and you will see the same page over here. Okay, now coming back to our resource group, let's see what we have. So we have our virtual network, okay, that we have created. In this virtual network, we have a test server, and the test server is created uh, inside our uh, our subnet, and that is the front end subnet. So now at this time, we are ready to deploy a virtual network gateway. So over here, let's do a search for, we'll actually stay inside this resource group first. I kind of like that, staying inside the resource group and then say create, and then virtual network gateway. So that is the one that we need and then hit create, and this should give me another window. Let's see what it's picking up. It's asking for a name. Region, I'm still gonna use East US. uh, so here it is already, I'm already inside this my VPN gateway subnet, that resource group. Okay, so I don't have to choose the resource group anymore. Now this one, you just, I can call it my P virtual network gateway. Okay, and then for the gateway type, I'm going to keep it VPN, and I'm going to go with the route based. VPN GW2 is good, generation 2 is good. Now what virtual network, this is going to be important, and we have created the network. Which one? The VNet server. And let's see, yeah, in the VNet server, it automatically picked up, you see the gateway subnet, nothing else you can select. This is automatically selected. As you knows that this is a special subnet that people would use for the gateway connection and deployment of the virtual network gateway. So that's looks very good. Now here you need a public IP address, and what I'll do, I'll copy this name and then say dash PIP, which is for public IP, and rest I'm gonna go with the default option. Now let's just go back in here and see how in this Azure lab they were trying to configure it. So to virtual network gateway IP address. So here they were creating the virtual network gateway, but we have already created. Okay, that's fine. Public IP address disable, that's all looks good. So I think I'm pretty good with my design, and it kind of matches with the Azure Microsoft guideline as well. So I'm good. Again, I don't care about the tags in a lab environment, and then let's start creating this particular virtual network gateway. Now the problem with this one, well, it's a problem, sometimes this uh, virtual network gateway, it takes a long time to create. So what I'll do at this time, I'm going to pause the video, and then again I'm going to start the video as soon as it's done. But for your own knowledge, it could take maybe up to even 45 minutes to an hour to get this deployment done. So please be patient and don't get frustrated. Okay, everyone. So this thing got deployed. It definitely took about 40 minutes for me. So you see, now I can go to the resource and let's see what we have. So this is the virtual network gateway. Okay, so if you look at the diagram from the official documentation, this is the virtual private network gateway. So that is what we have deployed right here. You see the symbol virtual network gateway, the symbol looks exactly the same. So but we have deployed, but we have not configured anything. Just giving you some information: the location, subscription ID, gateway type, it's a VPN gateway, it's a route based gateway, and the VNet server is the network that we're using. And you also have the IP address. Now this IP address is important. Now any client who wants to connect back to the network that this VPN gateway is connected to, we will be using this public IP from my client machine to get to the network on Azure. Okay, but the configuration is really what we need to do. We have not really done too much of configuration in this particular virtual network gateway. Now let's see what we need to do next. So let's see if they have given us any guidance in this one. So we have really created the VNet, that's done. The virtual network gateway, as I said, that this is now also done. We have created all that. We have created the IP address. Okay, so over here, the next thing they're saying now, general certificate. Okay, certificates are used by Azure to authenticate clients connecting to VPN over point to site connection. Now, where are you going to create this certificate? So we can create a root certificate and a client certificate anywhere, but I'm going to use my Windows system that I'm using right now to create those two certificates. And really, they have another really good link over here, Windows 10 partial instructions. If I open this one, it will take you over here, and over here it's got detailed instruction about how to create that one. So it's saying create a self-signed root certificate. I need to just run this command. So over here from my machine, I'm just gonna open up PowerShell ISC. I'm just open it as run as administrator, and let's open this one. Did not close normally. It's okay. So I'm gonna open a new file, and I'm gonna put this in here. Okay. So if you look at what it is, it's Cert, then new self-signed certificate, type custom, key specification, it's a signature, and it's a P2S point to site root certificate. Okay, there is a subject. Here is some policy for exportable. Hash algorithm is SHA-256. Key length is 2048. Now key store location is going to be Cert, current user, and then my, and then key usage property, sign, key usage, CertSign. Okay, let's see if I can run this one without any error. And look, it didn't give me an error, so I would think that this the command that I just ran, it was successful. Now, after you have generated a root certificate, you gotta generate a client certificate. And to do that, I'm just gonna copy this portion of the command and hit copy. Come back over here, put it down there, select this section, and that command also looks very similar, right? New self-signed certificate. And this time, if you see DnsName P2S child cert, okay, and then it's saying P2S child cert again over here, and it's going to the same place. And this time, instead of running the whole thing, I'm going to choose this one, which is the run selection. Hit enter, and look at that, everything got created. Okay, so let's see now how to get to the certificate and how to export that key and configure our VPN gateway. Give me 1 second. Alright, now since I created all of that in my local Windows 10 machine, I can go to my certificate manager. If you just start certificate, you will see the manage computer certificates. And let's see if we can get there. Okay, so that brings the certificate manager in my local computer. And under the personal one, I'm expecting if I click on the certificate, I am going to see some stuff. So let's see if I have, this is not the one though. So let's see where it put the certificate. All right, give me 1 second. Let me let me take a look at this one where it actually created. Actually, I'm actually at a wrong spot. So this what I opened up. This is for the certificate for the local computer. We really need to go to the certificate for the user. So you can go back and type certificate. Instead of manage computer certificate, we gotta manage the user certificate. Okay, so let's go there, open it up. Now what we'll do in here, if I go to personal certificate, I hope I have those certificates now, and look at that. So P2S child certificate and P2S root certificate, so those two we created using this PowerShell commands. Again, remember that we are now in the user certificate, not the computer certificate. Now at this time, what we need to do, we need to export this particular certificate and make sure that we gotta just look inside the certificate and export it. So let's see how to do that next. So what we are really doing, if you think about one more time, so the root certificate, we're going to export this one, and this root certificate will be placed on Azure. And from the client machine, we're going to use the client certificate to provide the authentication, and the root certificate which is on Azure, it is gonna look at your client certificate and say and decide whether the authentication is approved or not. So let's just export this one, the root certificate. So go to all tasks, export. That should bring up your certificate export to wizard. Click next, and no, do not export the private key. That's good. That's the default option. I'm not changing it. And in here you have multiple different version the way you want to export your certificate. I'm just gonna go ahead and use the base64 encoded X509 and then hit next, and now it needs a file name. Just call it client Cert and hit next, and it should add dots here at the end, and then let's see, it says export was successful. One thing that I probably missed is just storing. I don't remember where I exactly stored. So here I actually want to go say select the desktop and then say client Cert, and it will automatically pick up the CR. So now save it. So now I know where it's stored. The export was successful. So now I can go to my desktop. What is my desktop? Client PC, desktop, and on my desktop, this is the certificate. And let's just open up a notepad, and in this notepad I'm just gonna put this one, and what you're seeing here right now is the certificate. Okay, so that is what we're gonna need to configure our Azure virtual private network gateway. Okay, so let's just go ahead and see how to do that next. Okay, let's get back to our Azure. Okay, so now in Azure we have already got this virtual network gateway configured. Okay, so over here we have not really configured our point to site configuration. Okay, now over here you can come and say yeah, configure now, and here the first thing that you need to provide is an address pool, and let's see if we can get an address pool from our guideline that Microsoft gave. I just want to be consistent to some extent, although we didn't follow everything properly. So let's see, actually at the very top they had the image. So 172.16.2010/24. Let's use that one. So what it is, 172.168.201.0/24. Okay, let's double verify. 172.16.201.0/24, and in here we are going to use the IKEv2 with SSTP, and if you look at it, that is what they're using, SSTP tunnel. Okay, and authentication we are going to use Azure certificate. That is what we are going to use. Radius and exit directory we are not using at the moment, and name is called it client Cert, and then from here I'm going to copy all of that, the exported certificate, and provide in here the data as a data. Okay, and if you see over here, download VPN client it's disabled because we have not configured everything properly as of right now. But once we save this one, this download VPN client button should be enabled for us. Let's see what happens. So now I'm just trying to save this one, and let me see, once this is saved, if we have the download client available to us. Now once the download client is available to us, then it becomes very easy. The only thing you need to do, if anybody wants to connect to your network, you just give this client to that person. Now the client may be the downloader file, may be different for Windows, for Mac, for Linux, but it will have everything configured automatically, and you download, and then people can use from the client machine to connect back to the Azure as an extension of the VPN, and you should be able to now connect to the web server on the private IP address, and we'll demonstrate that just in a minute. So it's still going on, the deployment, so just let me pause and be back. Alright everyone, now it looks like it's now saved my gateway connection properly, and what you see now here, the download VPN client button is now available to me. So at this time, let's try to click on the download VPN client and see if we can download the client for my Windows machine. See what happens. So I clicked on that one. Now it's giving me a zip file. Let's just save the zip file, and let's see, go to Windows and open up this file. And over here, what you're seeing, you have a generic installer, you have the AMD64 and x86. I'm just gonna go there and install the VPN client in my machine. I'm just gonna hit run, and Microsoft Defender Smart Perimeter Unrecognized app. How do I click and then say run anyway for this one, because I'm trusting this client. And security scan requires to scan item could take. So for this one, it just thought that it could be a virus, but don't worry about it. If you're doing it in a local environment, it should be fine. Do you used to run and install a VPN client for VNET-SERVER? I'm gonna say yes, and hopefully the installation will start momentarily. Or the installation was very instant. Okay, so you can also right click on that file and just say open, and it will like after the extraction, or you can also say run as an administrator. You can install it that way as well. But what it will do once the installation is done, if you go down to your computer, go to your setting, then from the setting you just go down to your network and internet, and here your VPN, this new VPN connection should show up. And note that what it is, it's the VNet server. And what is the VNet server? VNet server is what, if you go back to your home and go to your virtual network gateway, if you look at your uh, your network, the network is the VNet server. So in this VNet server, what do you have? You have the virtual network gateway. Okay, if you look at the subnet, that's the gateway subnet. So we have used the gateway subnet to configure our uh, virtual network gateway, and it's connected to this particular virtual network. So now going back over here, now it should be pretty easy. Now if you click on this one, it's now asking, hey, do you want to connect? And right now, if you go back here right now, since it's not connected, I still cannot use the public IP address of the virtual machine to get to the web page. From the public IP address, I can still get to it. Okay, it should reload. Yeah, reload this page, but this is unable to do. So notice what happens now. If since we have completed everything, let's try to connect it, and it's going to open up this Azure VPN connection. Click connect to begin connecting. To work offline, click cancel. So let's try to connect, see what happens. Connection manager needs elevated privilege to run the following. Okay, so that's fine. You may have to go through the USC, and now look at that. It says you are now connected to your server. So one thing we can also do in here, we can do IP config and see if we get an VPN server is provided an IP address to us, which is 172.16 201.130. So now, do you remember that we configured our VPN connection and we said, hey, let's use the 172.16.210/24. That means anytime any client is trying to connect using this VPN gateway, it is going to assign randomly any IP address from that range. Okay, so that's what you are seeing right now in my command window. So that means I'm really connected to the virtual machine, and now if we have done everything right, we should be able to talk to this machine and hit enter, and look at that. Now we can get to the Iis webpage. We no longer have to use our public IP address. So let's do one last thing. Let's just copy this one and open up a new window, a new private window, just to prove that it's still working. I'm gonna click and look at that. I am able to access the web page as if my home laptop right now is connected to the Azure network that I have created. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Let me just rethink and think about some closing comments before I end the video. Alright, so everything has been successful. So before I close, let's just kind of recap what we have done. So we created one resource group on Azure. In that resource group, we created a virtual network. We just called it a virtual network server, VNet server. In this VNet server, we created two different subnets. One subnet is the front-end subnet where we have hosted our website, and then we created a gateway subnet, and in this gateway subnet we have hosted the virtual private gateway that is configured and which gave us the VPN client. Okay, now to do all of that stuff, we also had to create a self-signed certificate that we have created in our local Windows 10 machine. We created the root certificate and the client certificate, and then we exported the root certificate, placed the root certificate on the Azure side, and everything seems to be working just fine. Okay, one last time we would go back in here. So this is the setup that we have completed. So now you can think that my machine is having an IP address in that range 172.16.201, and my network is actually using 10.4.0.016 network, and now I have established a connection over VPN, and as if we are all on the same network. Okay, I'll try to give you as many resources as possible that I have used. Try to follow this lab. It's a little complicated, and it's a little longer lab than the others that I have done so far. So take your time and make sure that you understand all the steps, and good luck. Thank you. Leave your comments, and if you like, please like the video. Okay, bye bye.